And welcome to our final session of 17 trips to our library. And now, next week, we're going to continue with a whole different subject. Just to let you know where we're headed, we're going to tackle Matthew, the first part of Matthew, um, uh, the attempt that they had to really put together uh, their argument for Jesus. Um, in shorthand, we're going to tackle the Beatitudes in Matthew 5. But we can't conclude our visit to the library without introducing the book that is the most misleading, confusing, misinterpreted book, not only in the Christian library, but in the 66 books of our library. Of course, I'm referring to the Apocalypse of John of Patmos. Now, to introduce this book in a few minutes is not a reasonable task to undertake. I know that, but welcome to my attempt. It's my conviction that we can read, understand, and appreciate this book if we first consider 4 truths about this book. First of all, the first truth is that this book is written in code language. This was necessary because the author was a prisoner in the Roman Empire who wanted to share a message with persons through a letter, and the letter was to be carried by Roman guards out of the prison and sent to others. So it had to appear helpless and harmless. So you couldn't use language that talked about the persecution of the Roman Empire except if you used the code. And the code was biblical history, biblical stories, biblical imagery, which communicated a truth. Now, the best illustration that it was written in code language is the reference to the beast named 666. People have for centuries tried to identify that 666 beast as a contemporary figure in their period of human history, including people who are doing the same thing today. But 666 is so easy to understand if you understand the code. And the code was, as is throughout the book of the Apocalypse of Revelation, the understanding of the Hebrew numerical value of letters, numerology, if you will, of the Hebrew language. Every letter had a numerical value. If you take the letters of Nero Caesar, the initiator of cruel persecution of the Christians in 64 AD, you take the letters in that emperor's name, Nero Caesar, and accumulate the numerical value, it's 666. The beast is Nero Caesar, the initiator of cruel and unusual punishment of the followers of Jesus. The whole book is full of that kind of code language, which allowed the letter to be carried by Roman guards out of the prison as a helpless and harmless letter. Why? It was written in code language. The second truth you must understand is when we look at the book of Revelation is that this book represents the belief of a minority in the Hebrew community who believed in dualism. Dualism is the belief that there are two supreme beings um, representing good and evil. You take one letter out of good and you have the letter God. You add one letter to evil and you have the devil. So you have God and the devil as two equal supreme beings who are fighting each other for the allegiance of faithful followers. Now, this was a minority in the Jewish community, but it existed and it is represented in this book. For you see, in the Hebrew library, we understood the gradual development of ethical monotheism, the belief in one supreme being, one God, rather than two, which dualism affirms. And so you have a belief about supreme beings of a minority in the Hebrew community, but dualism dominates this letter in understanding. The third truth is that it affirms a worldview of history that invaded the Hebrew faith community when they were part of the Persian Empire. For this worldview was framed and articulated by Persian Zoroastrianism, another faith in the Near Eastern world. But this worldview, as they affirm dualism, they talk about the millennium, they talk about the second coming of the Messiah, they talk about the end of human history, and the final victory of righteousness, including everlasting bliss of the faithful 144,000, which again is a code. What does 144,000 represent in Hebrew numerology? Infinity, an unlimited number of the faithful, not a limiting number of those existing in everlasting bliss. Finally, fourth, the truth about this book is that it is the most profound and concise proclamation of hope in the library. The persecution of followers of Jesus between 90 and 100 AD, when this book was written, was severe and cruel and common. And there's no book in the Hebrew library or in the Christian library that articulates a message of hope like the last book in the Christian library, the Apocalypse of John of Patmos. There's nothing comparable to this book. The oft-quoted message of Paul concerning faith, hope, and love to the church in Corinth permeates the Christian library. Love is defined and illustrated throughout the 27 books. Faith is defined throughout the 27 books, including the articulation in the book of Hebrews. Hope is referred to often, but in the face of death, the book of the Apocalypse of John proclaims hope as the last stand of human existence. Proclaims hope as the last stand of human existence, even in the face of persecution. Now, When the 27 books were identified for inclusion in the Christian library, leaders knew that this code was broken. They knew it was a code. They knew it was written in the most extreme human condition that required the code. They knew that the worldview was time-bound and already proven to be inaccurate. They also know that faith prevailed in the corporate life of the followers of Jesus, and the existence of the official religion of the empire in the 4th century was dependent upon the hope proclaimed in this book. Therefore, it fell within the drip line to be included in the Christian library, which provided the foundation for one of the 3 major religions of the Western world. I want to conclude with a personal story of Karen, my wife, and myself. A few weeks ago, we attended the funeral of our great-granddaughter. The United Methodist pastor who led the service included in his sermon several references from the book of Revelation. No mention of the code, no mention of the worldview, no reference to the beast, just the powerful and unmatched message of hope, based on the presence of divine love when human beings face the tragedies of life. And that personal experience of hurt, grief, pain, separation, I thought of our trip to our library and rediscovered the truth that 65 books would not have been enough. Indeed, the message of hope is the capstone message of our trip to the library and our journey of faith and love. Not complete without hope. At the end of our 17 weeks, I just have one question to leave with you, and that is, what are your primary learnings of our 17-week trip to our library? I've enjoyed the trip. I hope it's been a trip of enjoyment for you. Check in next week for a new journey together. Thank you.